Good morning and welcome back.
Here's what we're focusing on this half an hour.
In the 1950s, most American men and women felt a wife's place was in the home. That has obviously changed dramatically today, but is it changing again?
Which leads us to Tyler, who's on Facebook Live right now. And the question we're asking folks on Facebook, what is it?
Do men want their wives to stay at home? There's some new research indicating that more millennials actually believe that. So we want to hear from you. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's the case?
Those numbers are pretty shocking. We'll dig into that. Also,
we're tracking a changing climate using a single tree, what the tree revealed, and why a Seattle Times reporter has written an entire book about it.
And grocery stores are doing something their online competitors cannot. They are feeding us while we shop, and who doesn't want to do that?
About
the rising
time.
phenomenon of grocerants and what they mean for our next trip to the store.
But first, you may remember this story we covered last week, a violent home invasion in Everett, all captured on the homeowner's security camera.
Yeah, that footage, it went viral on social media, prompting one of the suspects to turn himself in this week.
But it really got us thinking, how has the evolution of social media impacted the way we report and investigate crime? So we went to our resident expert, Washington's Most Wanted host, David Rose, who had great insight as to why it works.
The video was posted on Facebook basically in viral form so that you could hear the woman scream, you could see the suspects committing a really violent home invasion. And that kind of video, it causes an emotional reaction when we see it. And we want to get that guy, no matter who we are. We've been on 9 years. We've caught 873 fugitives. And I would say a small percentage, but a significant percentage, have surrendered because they've seen themselves on the show, on Facebook, on Twitter.
David says social media doesn't just help catch the bad guys, it also can deter them from committing their crimes in the first place, which is why he says business owners, honestly homeowners as well, should arm themselves with cameras.
It provides the evidence needed to stop these guys. Label those cameras. You are on video when you come in our store. That will serve as a deterrent, because we need all of us looking for these criminals. And if they know that they're going to be caught on camera and they're going to be spread to everybody's Facebook that they know, they might think twice before they go and pull that gun and commit a robbery.
He also points out, look, all this social media sharing might make it seem like there's more crime. That's something that he hears a lot. But he says there isn't. It's just we're all much more connected, and now we're trying to fight it together, which is much different than how things used to be.
It's interesting that it's a double-edged sword of us feeling maybe a little less safe, but that this actually helps catch them.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes in the next few years. Okay, so we want to get to this question we mentioned at the top of the show. Do millennial men want their women to stay at home? That is a real question being asked in a New York Times this week in an op-ed column. So author Stephanie Kuntz, who teaches history and family studies at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, cites several recent studies, including one by the Council on Contemporary Families. Take a look. They found over 80% of young men in 1994 rejected the idea that a family structure needed to include a male breadwinner. Yet by 2014, that number fell to below 60%. So what could this mean? One political scientist quoted in the article suggests maybe this is an attempt by young men to compensate for a perceived loss of dominance in the working world as more and more women work. But Travis, another hypothesis by the article's author, I thought this was really interesting. She cites evidence that it could be stemming not necessarily from overt sexism, but from now millennials who did grow up in a two working parent household, and they witnessed the potential challenges and stresses of that.
That is an interesting theory. It's interesting numbers as well, because it just sort of doesn't feel like the arc of history and the way that we should be going.
No, and they think it might be going back at some point as the millennials get older, so it'll be interesting to track those numbers.
I'm really interested to hear what people say about this over on our Facebook page, so Tyler's on that right now. We'll read some of your responses later in the show. In the meantime, the cast and crew from the largest community theater in the Pacific Northwest may feel like they're living a season of Glee, or at least the season finale. That's because they are going to nationals. There they are, all dressed up in their costumes. Tacoma Musical Playhouse just won the ActFest 2017 Regional Festival in Boise, Idaho, with their production of, can you guess by looking at the costumes, The Addams Family. And that means, right? Cool costumes. The show, by all accounts, fantastic. They represent the entire Pacific Northwest in the national competition in Minnesota. That'll be in June. This is a really big deal because ACT actually represents more than 7,000 theaters around the country. Tacoma Musical Playhouse now working feverishly to raise $30,000 to help pay for their trip. So if you can donate, maybe you can help them out.
I love it. That's wonderful. I love hearing things like that,
Me
Travis.
too, me too. I love reporting great news.
Yes, it's nice to report great news from time to time. Okay, there are trees all around us here in Washington, understatement of the year, but we probably take a lot of them for granted. One local author has an incredible new take. She spent one entire year exploring the changes in one tree, a red oak tree in Massachusetts, and to see how it relates to climate change. And what she found is fascinating. She talks all about it in her new book, Witness Tree: Seasons of Change with a Century-Old Oak.
So joining us this morning, Linda V. Mapes, who is also a reporter with our news partner, the Seattle Times. Good morning.
Good morning. Delighted to be here.
This is a fantastic book. I'm looking forward to reading what we've read about it. So would you talk about this project kind of in summary for us so we have an idea where to begin here?
Sure. So as a reporter, I was looking at a way to tell the climate change story differently. Sick of the politics, tired of the angry debates, the gloom, the doom. I wanted to see if I could see climate change on the landscape, to see climate change in living things, to really take the quiet testimony of nature. So I went and I lived at the Harvard Forest for a year and focused on a single 100-year-old oak tree. And you know what? You can see climate change in just one tree. And I want people to claim this, know that their senses tell them the truth. What they see, what they hear when they're out in their garden, when they're hiking. We all know this intuitively. Spring is earlier. Fall is later. Winter is getting squeezed on both ends. Our world is changing.
Why did you choose this particular tree?
Because it was 100 years old. So it sprouted by a stone wall in New England just as Model Ts are coming off the assembly line, and our world is changing. We are beginning to go whole hog into the fossil fuel convenience that is our modern life. And nobody did this to croak the planet. They did it to live more interesting, productive, and profitable lives. I mean, as a woman, fossil fuels meant I didn't have to work in the house at, brute labor all the time. I could suddenly write books or work at a newspaper. I mean, this energy lifestyle that we've adopted wasn't intended to hurt the planet, but what we know now is that we are changing our world in ways that really matter. This is physics. It's very simple. CO2 warms the atmosphere. The more there is, the warmer it's going to get. And that affects the living world. It's changing the seasonal timing of nature. There are two seasons now, the natural seasons that are in the evolutionary timing of living things, whether they're salmon or trees, and the seasons made by us.
Let's talk about this specific tree and what you actually saw. It feels both physical and spiritual when I hear you talk about it.
This is very true. So the tree, for one thing, is incredibly beautiful. It's about 85 feet high. It's got a 60-foot wide crown spread. I picked an oak because oak is the most common species in the Northern Hemisphere. Here's what I learned. It's growing faster than ever before. CO2 actually works like a kind of fertilizer because that, after all, is carbon that plants use through photosynthesis to grow. So it's growing faster than ever because our CO2 levels now are over 400 ppm. Used to be 300. No human has ever breathed this atmosphere. We have created an atmosphere that's got more CO2 in it than in the past 800,000 years. Plants know this. They're growing differently. My tree's going faster. Not only that, it's doing it with less water. It doesn't even open the mouths on the bottom of its leaves, called stomata, as much because there's so much CO2 in the atmosphere. It doesn't have to. So here you are seeing a global phenomenon, climate change, all the way inside the cellular function of individual leaves. Incredible to me that you can see this so intimately in such a minute way when it's a global force that's changing our world. And you know what that meant to me was, you don't have to decide whether you believe climate change. That just frames it all wrong. It's an observable, physical fact. And we can see it not in the far future, far away, right here in our own backyards, in the living things around us. We also learned that the leaves are actually falling off the tree before fall completely ends because these growing seasons are so supersized, so long now. They last longer than the leaves. That was incredible to me. The idea that these trees are still on the ancestral timing, their earlier ancestors, but we have these new seasons now that they can't even keep up with.
That's crazy. And it sounds like there are so many wonderful takeaways from your book. Linda V. Mapes, we really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you're going to be talking about this book and climate change at the Seattle Public Library next week?
Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, downtown at the Central Library. Please come join us.
All the details there on your screen, and your book goes on sale Tuesday as well. So I'm sure any local bookstores or Amazon, if we want to buy it, I know I'm excited to read it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here very much.
All right, there is a new trend that could change the way all of us shop. More and more stores are offering things like pizza to eat while we're grocery shopping, or maybe wine to sip on while we browse the aisles.
So there is even a name for this combination grocery store and eatery. Call it grocerants. Is that the right way to say it?
Sure, yeah.
Restaurants and groceries.
Made-up word.
Customers get the convenience of being able to get a meal and fill their shopping carts at the same time.
This is fascinating. We already know places like Safeway and QFC offer sandwiches and fried chicken, but this concept is actually an extension of that. Some even include, as we try to get our technology to work, sit-down service with waiters, full bars, even sushi chefs?
Waiters and sushi chefs at the grocery store.
At the grocery store.
So as an example, there is Whole Foods that is already doing something like this. 15% of sales come from the eateries. A variety of freshly prepared foods, gourmet hot dogs, even steak and shrimp. And as I mentioned, 15% of the sales, and a growing amount, by the way, from these in-store eateries.
And you might ask yourself, but what's in it for them? Oh, there's a lot in it for them. So Grocerants actually generated 2.4 billion visits and $10 billion in sales in 2016. So it works pretty well for everyone. Analysts say this is going to change the way a lot of stores decide to do business.
And certainly is in response to online grocery shopping, Amazon Fresh and other things like that, because this is something that an e-tailer can't really compete with.
Well, and think about the fact that most of us are hungry when we go to the grocery store. So if they're offering us food that we don't have to wait to eat when we get home.
Seems like a great idea.
Brilliant.
Also, deciding to try to become a parent is supposed to be a time of joy and hope, but did you know that 1 in 6 couples, that hope can actually turn to heartbreak very, very quickly?
Well, after this, we're going to break down the silence on infertility and discuss the literal race to end it.
And Tyler, what are we talking about right now on Facebook?
Do millennial men want their wives to stay at home? New research indicates that more men agree with this statement. But we want to hear from you, so head to our Q13 Fox Facebook page. Here's one. Vic says, I mean, I guess if you're a caveman, that's great, but a woman should be able to choose for herself.
Thanks,
so we'll read more responses later on.
Excited. Thanks, Tyler.
Good morning. You know, starting a family may seem to be the most natural thing in the world. You just open a bottle of wine and 9 months later, bam. But for 1 in 6 couples, it's not that at all. It's an emotional, physical, and financial struggle.
And one we just don't talk about publicly very often. That's the driving force behind Seattle's first ever Race for Fertility, a fertility grant giving $5,000. The race at the end of this month, which also happens to be Infertility Awareness Month.
So we really wanted to dive into this topic. Joining us to talk more about the race itself and the issues surrounding infertility, we have Dr. Laura Shaheen from Pacific Northwest Fertility and Tamara Tobias, nurse practitioner with Seattle Reproductive Medicine. Good morning to you both.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
nice
you for
to
having
have
us.
2 different clinics represented here. You don't hear about that happening very often.
Well,
so
we're better together.
Yes, we are.
the more heads that come together, the better. Now, I'm going to be honest. When I grew up, I did not hear about infertility. This was not a thing. People either had kids or they didn't.
Right.
There was no talk about a struggle. It was just this thing that happened. Are we hearing more about it because more people are going through infertility or because more people are talking about it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there is more awareness of infertility, and I think that's a wonderful thing. It's been surrounded by shame and guilt for so long, and finally people are talking about it. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I do think it is more the awareness as well. And technology is changing and advancing. So even within the last 5 years, we have advances like egg freezing, which we didn't even have before. So I think there is definitely an increased awareness.
And different ways of making your family. My husband and I, for example, have a different story than other families and how we made our family happen, for example. I'm wondering if you could help define infertility for us in pretty simple terms. You know, when we talk about, for example, male factor versus female factor, what about recurrent miscarriage? I mean, if you could kind of paint us a picture, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, sure. So infertility from a textbook is trying to conceive for about a year and not being able to conceive. And that affects about 15 to 20% of the population. So about 80% of the time, a couple will conceive within the first year of trying.
And so for the 20% who don't?
that's technically infertility, and it's a great time to do a little evaluation and ask some more questions.
What about recurrent miscarriage? Is that under the umbrella of infertility, or is that something separate?
Well, it's defined differently, but in the same way, someone's struggling to start their family and it's not happening. So in recurrent miscarriage, people are conceiving, so it's not the definition of infertility, but at the end of the day, they still don't have their family yet.
You both work extensively with people trying to start their families. I know that you work closely with patients. You see their frustration at hand. Stress has to come into it. Going through infertility treatments is stressful. But then you read so many things. And the first thing people will say to you if you haven't been able to start your family is, just relax. Just, what's wrong with you? You're so stressed. You're right. Stressed out people never get pregnant. Never. Only easygoing people are allowed to become parents. How do you counsel? You both work with patients. I want to hear from both of you about what you say to your patients about stress and the impact on fertility or not.
Well, Dr. Shaheen actually wrote a blog all about stress. I'll let you start with that one.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's the most common question that Tamara and I get. We're actually talking about it before we come on. And it's sort of a chicken and the egg scenario. So not being able to start your family is stressful. Going through treatments can be stressful, and it's very circular. And there's got to be a little bit of a mind-body connection, but I think one of the worst things that we can say is don't stress. Then you start stressing
not to stress.
And so we both talk to our patients about we can't control stress. We can't manage what happens to us, but we can manage how we deal with it. And there's a lot of resources in the community for helping people manage stress.
And resources like Resolve. Resolve is a patient-led support group. We have 8 support groups now with Resolve, which is amazing. Years ago, we had 1 or none. We have yoga for fertility, mind-body programs, counselors. And my thing I tell patients all the time is walk. Even in the rainy days, if you can just get outside, and 15 minutes just to get outside, take that deep breath, and go for a walk.
Which is a perfect place for us to ask about the Fertility Walk itself.
Yes, a good lead. So Fertility Walk all started because of this guy. So Fertility Walk is a book that I wrote for 2 reasons. One was it's just a simple guide to help patients beginning that fertility journey, and I describe it as a walk. And then the second reason is that proceeds from this book go to Fertility Walk Hope Fund, which is a nonprofit I started to provide grants to those who can't afford treatment. So Dr. Shaheen and I were talking, and she said, you have to do a walk. And I said, great, we can do a walk, but how am I going to do this? So I started just going on the internet, and I really feel it was like the law of attraction. I stumbled across Footsteps for Fertility, and they too are a nonprofit organization, and they do 5K races in which they get grants, grants that'll give back to the patients at the end of the race. And so after I chatted with them, I called all the local fertility practices, and long behold, now we're giving away free IVF cycles. The winners are going to get free genetic screening as well as $1,000 towards meds. All the patients that register are going to get a copy of Fertility Walk. And we've raised enough money so far to give away 2 $5,000 grants in addition. So pretty incredible.
We have to talk about the cost of this because for people who have never gone through this, it's not as simple as showing up and your insurance covers it. Every insurance is different. Some insurance will cover a lot, some will cover none.
Exactly.
What are you seeing in the numbers as far as, is there an average of what the average person or couple might have to pay?
Sure, I think that in general, an average number is a single IVF cycle might cost about $12,000.
Just for one try to get pregnant.
One try, which we know may not always work the first try. Plus the cost of medications. So the medications can run up between $3,000 to $4,000.
On top of the traditional cost of having a baby.
Right,
true.
I know, but there is more insurance coverage now than ever before. In Washington State, it's not mandated that insurance covers fertility treatments, but there are several businesses and companies that do help their employees with coverage.
Which has been fantastic here in Seattle.
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that since this is such an important month about raising awareness, so if I can't go to the walk or how could I still help? And just talking about it, I feel like, is sort of a step in the right direction. But how else can folks help?
That's great. Well, the whole month of April is Infertility Awareness Month. And we kicked it off with an art exhibit at the Seattle Center in the A&T Gallery. It's a really special exhibit. It's called The Art of Infertility. which is a play on assisted reproductive technology, the art of infertility. And it's a collection of works by infertility patients, and it's done by Elizabeth Walker and Maria Novacek, and they put this together, and it's a traveling exhibit, and we worked really hard to bring it to Seattle, and it opened on April 1st. There's 2 movies and documentaries about infertility that are showing. One already showed on April 2nd. That was One More Shot, a wonderful documentary.
That's fantastic, yeah.
And the second one is on April 27th, and that is Vegas Baby. It's another documentary that's going to be shown. And the art exhibit is open all month, and the walk is April 22nd. What time?
9 to 11 at Seward Park.
Perfect. Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about this that we're going to keep them and tape another segment so that we can field some of your questions and unpack this even more. So, Dr. Laura Shaheen, really appreciate it. Tamara Tobias, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
No, it's a really important topic. And again, the Race for Fertility is April 22nd at Seattle Seward Park. You can learn more by visiting footstepsforfertility.org and just click on events.
Still ahead, do men want their wives to stay at home? New research indicating more millennials feel that way. We've been asking for your responses to that research over on Facebook. We'll read some of those after this.
And take a look at your screen. This is our Friday trivia. Keep in mind, Travis and I have no idea for the answer. And in fact, our producer, Bhavisha, takes great pride in stumping us. So take a look at your screen, head over to our Facebook page, let us know your thoughts so you can help us cheat, and then we'll reveal the answer on the other side of this break. Welcome back. Here's your trivia answer. It's
Tyler
gloves.
was right.
People most likely to buy them in the wrong size. All right.
We've been talking about whether millennials think that wives should be staying at home or not. What are folks saying on Facebook?
Great responses on our Facebook page. Karen says, great idea, but life is so expensive now that's most likely not a reality. Put a heavy burden on the breadwinner, which I argue could be either person.
Totally. Right. Gender doesn't matter necessarily. Most people on the side of what?
Most people on the side of it should just be their decision, and whoever wants to work or stay home or both, you know.
And every family's different.
That's right.
Whatever works for
Whatever
you
works
is
for you.
fantastic.
Fabulous.
And more power to you. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Remember, we're here every Friday at 9:30, and of course, more morning show tomorrow morning, Saturday.